we want to go to another major political fight that's brewing, and that's, of course, choosing the successor to the Supreme Court after Justice Antonin Scalia passed away. Big questions. When should the Democratic president submit the name? How should the Republican Senate respond? Plus, we're talking about cases the Supreme Court is now considering that's going to affect your life. And so we have two local attorneys joining me to discuss this. David Shiner, he's the general counsel for the Republican Party of Palm Beach County, and Gary Lesser, an attorney who's also involved in politics, has supported Democrats and some Republicans as well. First of all, I've got to say good morning. Thanks for waking up early on a Sunday.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thanks for having us here.
Sure, we're happy to have you. So first, let's start with President Obama saying he wants to name a nominee soon. The Republicans in the Senate saying they're not going to hold any hearings, not going to be casting any votes. So the big question is, who's got the better argument?
Well, I mean, you know, to look at it this way, the president has to do his job. So he is charged with the responsibility of nominating somebody to replace Justice Scalia at this point in time. The Republicans have made a pretty good argument that in the past the Democrats have tried to stop that nomination when the term was running out. But at this point in time, it looks like it may be too far in the distance in order for the Republicans to really be able to stonewall this opportunity for Obama.
You're up.
So it's hard to believe that this is actually a debate that we're having. I think President Obama has the better argument because the president has the better argument. In the United States Constitution, Article 2, Section 2, it's pretty clear the president shall have the power to appoint. He has the power to appoint. The Senate has the power and has the ability to give advice and consent. To try to do a blockade to keep anyone from coming forward, any hearings at all, is massive overreach.
Is this something that you guys see just because you think it's an election year, or is it a bigger?
Well, of course it's an election year, and it's important because this time next year, we're going to have a different president. So right off the bat, I think it's important to understand that Obama's on his way out, and we're going to look for a new president, hopefully a Republican president maybe to appoint. The situation now is there's 54 Republicans in the Senate right now, and they don't have that 60% number in order to filibuster Obama. So if Obama's going to appoint somebody, it's going to have to be somebody that's going to be more moderate, that he can get past the Republicans.
You know, there's two different approaches in support of why the Republicans say we should delay. Now, first of all, the United States Supreme Court, as much as possible, should be separated from all of this political nonsense. Donald Trump has great intellectual honesty. He says, delay, delay, delay. So he's very clear with his intentions. The other argument that the Democrats tried to block someone in 1988. So, number one, two wrongs, of course, don't make a right. And what's fascinating is while there is video of Senator Biden saying maybe we should hold off, there's also a video of a younger Senator McConnell saying that this is wrong and that we should not stop qualified candidates from going forward. His current position is no candidate should go forward at all, no hearings whatsoever. And that's wrong.
You know, I think a lot of people listen to these arguments back and forth, and they just think it's an election year, this is all about politics, but it actually affects the voting that goes on as well. There's some major cases that are pending, we know, for the Supreme Court. One of them I want to talk about this morning is an abortion case that would require doctors performing abortions to be affiliated with hospitals. Some pro-choice supporters say it would reduce a woman's access to abortion. So what do you see happening in a case like that?
A lot of decisions, anywhere between 20 and 30% of U.S. Supreme Court decisions are 5-4 vote. And abortion decisions have been 5-4 on most major decisions over the last few years. So number one, if we don't fill that seat, we risk a 4-4 outcome. So to the litigants involved, to the issues involved, thank you for litigating for a few years on this very important issue to our country. You're going to go home with a 4-4 tie. We're really sorry about that. Our Supreme Court's supposed to do its job. So that means that the president will appoint, shall appoint, and the Senate will give advice and consent and confirm. If we don't have 9, it's going to be a lot harder to get any real conclusive decision.
So you essentially think everything's put on hold then, with the lack of a tie-breaking vote?
No, not at all. I mean, not in this case. I mean, what happens if there's a 4-4 tie, the lower appellate court decision stands. In this case, specifically the case you're referencing out of Texas, if the Supreme Court has a 4-4 tie, then the lower court, the Texas appeal court, is going to stand, and what's going to happen is it's going to be a little bit more restrictive on abortion clinics in Texas, and that was what we were talking about. Either way, whether President Obama has an opportunity to nominate somebody or not and get confirmed, it's certainly not going to happen in this series of cases, because nobody's going to get appointed and confirmed either way.
So do you see a road to compromise at all, or is this a standoff?
I think we're going to see a compromise, only because otherwise we're going to wait to the election in November, the inauguration in January, and then the president, whoever he or she is, putting forth someone. It could be March, April, May of 2017 until we have a ninth justice on U.S. Supreme Court. So I think it's going to be up to President Obama. If he nominates someone that is really more of a liberal firebrand, well, then we're going to have a real no result. I think if President Obama chooses someone who the Senate has already confirmed, there are 3 people who have previously been confirmed for the U.S. Court of Appeals. You have Mary Louise Kelly, who got 96-0, Sri Srivansan, 97-0 vote, and then Alberto Jordan, 94-5. So how could the U.S. Senate say, we liked all 3 of those candidates and felt they were highly qualified, but we don't want to hear from them today? I think if President Obama chooses someone like that, there perhaps could be a road to compromise.
And do you think this sets the stage, what's going on right now, for what could happen in the future, where you have whoever's not controlling the White House essentially blocking a nomination?
I don't think anything's going to change. This is just part of the political process, unfortunately. Depending on what side you sit on is how it works. I mean, the other thing that could occur is the Supreme Court could decide to table these issues, some of the cases have not yet been heard, and push them over to the next session. At that point in time, again, depending on who President Obama puts up for nomination, there may be 9 justices at that point in time. But it's really all going to depend on who Obama wants to put up there as his choice.
I respectfully disagree. I think if we don't get a 9th Supreme Court justice and that seat is open for 14, 15, 16 months because of a political play, it sets horrible precedent. And who's to say this couldn't happen again? If it happens, it has a much greater likelihood of happening again. In 1998, the Democrats tried to do it. You know, the strong Thurman rule, that's what it's called. It's not even an official rule. It says if there's 6 months until the election, or a lot more than that, then maybe we don't fill that seat. Now, any rule, even an informal one that's named after a segregationist, probably should be looked at suspiciously. But it wasn't 6 months. Justice Scalia died 15 days ago. And on that very same day is the day that Senator McConnell said, we can't fill this seat.
It's amazing how quickly this battle has been brewing. And yeah, a lot of people, pundits, everyone attributes it to the fact we're in an election year. Do you guys think this is going to be a huge issue for voters or not?
It should be. I mean, you know, the president's, one of the most important things that the U.S. president does is appoint the Supreme Court justices and other federal justices. And so I think anytime anybody casts a vote in an election, they need to consider that that person they're voting for has the power to nominate the next Supreme Court justice. So certainly it's a political play any way you look at it.
I think it's going to backfire terribly on the Republican Party. One of the critiques of the Republican Party is don't be obstructionist, govern. If you don't like Obamacare, put forth something that you really think will work for our whole country. This is the most obstructionist move we've seen affecting the U.S. Supreme Court in the history of our country. And I think voters aren't going to like it, especially if President Obama puts forth a qualified candidate who can't even get a hearing.
Well, I really appreciate you both coming in. It's definitely an interesting topic. It's one a lot of people are talking about, so we appreciate all of your insight.